The winter sun was slipping behind the mountains of Anchorage, washing Elmwood Street in a pale gold that made the quiet neighborhood look almost peaceful. From afar, nothing seemed wrong. Snow-covered roofs, silent porches, the hush of a small Alaskan evening. But behind one worn wooden step and a pale blue porch light, the stillness cracked with a sob so soft it nearly vanished into the icy wind. A little boy stood there, Mason Wells, just 7 years old, clutching a tattered teddy bear with trembling fingers. His cheeks were streaked with tears and cold, his voice barely escaping his lips. "He hurt my grandma." Those 4 words shattered the calm of the world around him. Behind the boy, Eleanor Wells, her silver hair tangled, her pale blue coat torn, a dark bruise spreading across her cheek, struggled to sit upright, hiding her pain from the child she loved. If you believe no child should ever face fear alone, that kindness and courage still matter in this world. Please take a moment to like this video, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, where we remind the world that compassion is still the strongest force we have. Cry in the winter silence of Anchorage. A heavy winter dusk pressed down over Anchorage, turning Elmwood Street into a corridor of swirling white. 7-year-old Mason Wells stood at the edge of the small porch, his small body shaking in the violent wind. He clutched a faded stuffed bear to his chest, the seams worn from years of being hugged through storms, nightmares, and lonely nights. His cheeks were blotched red, not only from the cold, but from the tears that kept spilling down his face. His breath trembled in the icy air, making him look even smaller in a world that suddenly felt brutal and enormous. Behind him, Eleanor Wells, his grandmother, sat slumped on the top step of the porch. Eleanor was a woman in her mid-60s, petite and gentle-featured, the kind of woman who always smiled with her eyes even when life had been unkind. Tonight, she looked impossibly fragile. Strands of her soft silver hair clung to her forehead. Her light blue wool coat was torn at the shoulder, and a deep purple bruise stained the left side of her face. Her knees trembled as she tried to stay upright, one hand clutching her arm to fight the sharp pain radiating through it. She tried to hide her fear from Mason, but the mask had cracked. Just beyond the doorframe stood Derek Malone, the man who had caused the damage. Derek was tall, broad-shouldered, and somewhere in his early 40s. His face was flushed with alcohol, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. He had the look of someone who once might have appeared trustworthy. Short brown hair, a strong jawline, but months of drinking and simmering anger had carved harsh lines into his face. His flannel jacket hung crookedly, and he held a half-empty whiskey bottle, like a weapon rather than a drink. He had promised to help Eleanor during the harsh winter, but those promises had soured quickly. The death of Eleanor's husband had left the house too quiet, too vulnerable, and Derek had filled the silence with shouting, slamming doors, and now, violence. Mason's voice cracked as he finally managed to speak through the cold and terror. "He hurt my grandma!" The words drifted into the wind, thin and trembling, yet sharp enough to pierce through the stillness of the darkening street. And far down the snowy road, 2 silhouettes emerged through the whiteout. The first figure was a tall man in his early 40s, walking with a heavy, deliberate stride. He wore a navy winter coat that hung to mid-thigh, a red and black checkered flannel shirt beneath it, faded jeans, brown leather boots, and a black knit beanie with a small pin that read U.S. Army Veteran. His build was strong, the kind of strength sculpted not by vanity, but by necessity. His face carried the sharp geometry of hard-earned resilience, square jaw, straight nose, deep-set brown eyes that seemed warm at first glance, yet sharpened instantly when danger appeared. Along his jawline ran a neatly trimmed beard, peppered with subtle strands. Of gray, signs of both age and battles long survived. This was Ethan Cole, a former Navy SEAL, now living a quieter life on the outskirts of Anchorage. He carried the silent weight of memories that didn't fade, memories that sometimes made him walk a little slower, especially with his left leg. The knee stiffened by a battlefield injury he rarely mentioned, but never forgot. Beside him walked Atlas, a 5-year-old German shepherd. Atlas moved with controlled strength, his black and tan coat bristling in the wind. His amber eyes flicked constantly through the environment, alert to every sound and motion. His black harness bore the words in white, "Service dog, do not pet." Atlas was trained to remain calm, steady, and silent. But at that moment, he lifted his head sharply and released a low, warning bark that vibrated against the snow-filled air. Ethan paused, following Atlas's gaze. Through the churning snow, he saw Mason on the ground and Eleanor injured behind him. And Derek, looming too close, bottle in hand. Ethan's breath tightened in his chest. Something old and painful pulsed through him. Something from childhood, from rooms where shouting had been the soundtrack of every night. Rooms where no one had come. Atlas barked again, louder, sharper. Ethan's expression hardened, but before he could move, Derek stumbled forward, his boots sliding across the icy porch. His arms swung out wildly, and in one drunken motion, he knocked both Eleanor and Mason off balance. They fell into the snow with a dull thud. Eleanor cried out, a weak sound swallowed by the wind. Mason clung to her, sobbing harder. Atlas let out a sudden, urgent bark, one with the edge of alarm. Ethan took a step forward. Snow whipped across his face. Wind roared. Atlas braced himself. And for a suspended moment frozen in winter's breath, it was unclear whether Ethan would reach them in time. The soldier who heard snow break. The wind howled like a warning siren as Ethan sprinted toward the porch, his boots cutting through the thick layer of fresh snow. Every step sent a jolt up his injured left knee, a reminder of a battlefield far from Alaska. Yet he ignored the pain. The cold stung his face, but his attention sharpened into a single point. The trembling figures of Mason and Eleanor lying helpless in the snow. Beside him, Atlas surged forward in fluid, disciplined strides. The German shepherd's breath puffed in short bursts, his muscles tight beneath the black tan coat. His amber eyes locked onto Derek with razor clarity, measuring distance, threat, movement. Atlas wasn't merely reacting, he was calculating. Derek staggered backward when he saw the man and dog approaching. His fingers tightened around the neck of the whiskey bottle, as if it were the last piece of power he possessed. His breath reeked of cheap alcohol, frosting in the cold air around his mouth. Ethan came to a stop several feet away, planting himself firmly between the attacker and the victims. His square jaw tensed. Snowflakes clung to the trimmed beard along his cheeks, glinting beneath the street's dim winter lights. "Step away," Ethan said, his voice low, yet carrying across the yard. "Now." For a moment, Derek hesitated, fear and defiance warring in his glassy eyes. His broad shoulders twitched, as if preparing for another swing. Atlas lowered into a defensive stance. He emitted a deep, controlled growl, the kind that vibrated through the ground and into the bones of anyone nearby. The message was unmistakable, but Derek was drunk enough to mistake fear for courage. He lifted the bottle. Ethan reacted instantly. "Atlas, front hold!" The command snapped through the air. Atlas didn't pounce. Instead, he leapt forward with precision, placing himself directly in Derek's space, barking once, a powerful burst of sound that sent snow shaking from the porch railing. Startled, Derek stumbled back and slipped on a patch of ice near the top step. The bottle flew from his hand, shattering on the wooden boards with a crack that echoed down the street. Mason flinched at the sound. Eleanor's breath hitched. Ethan moved closer, not aggressive, but with the steady confidence of a man who'd diffused chaos 100 times before. His eyes never left Derek's hands. The most dangerous part of a drunk man wasn't always what he held, but what he might reach for. "Don't make this harder," Ethan said quietly. Derek tried to rise, but his legs shook beneath him. He glared up at Ethan, his red face twisting into something both pitiful and furious. "This is my house," he slurred, though the words barely formed. "She let me stay." "You were supposed to help her," Ethan replied, "not hurt her." The truth struck harder than any punch. Derek looked away, unable to meet the gaze of a man who saw straight through him. Snow crunched behind Ethan as someone approached. A neighbor, Linda Carver, a woman in her late 40s, stood at the edge of her walkway, her arms wrapped tightly around a brown winter coat. Her dark hair peeked from under a knitted hat, and worry lined her kind but weary face. She knew the Wells family. Everyone on Elmwood Street did. "Is Eleanor all right?" Linda called out softly, fear and compassion mixing in her voice. "She will be," Ethan answered without turning. "Could you stay with them for a moment?" Linda nodded and hurried to Mason's side. She knelt and placed a gloved hand on his shoulder. Mason clung to his grandmother, his small body shaking. Linda whispered calming words, her presence a quiet counterweight to the storm. Seeing them safe, Ethan focused on Derek again. The man wasn't finished. Derek growled something incoherent and pushed himself up, lunging toward Ethan with one wild, uncoordinated motion. Atlas moved first. The dog leapt forward, not to bite, but to beat a block. His body struck Derek with controlled force, knocking the man sideways into the porch railing. Derek collapsed to his knees, breath knocked out of him, but uninjured, just contained. Ethan stepped in and grabbed Derek's wrist, twisting it behind his back with practiced precision. The move was smooth, efficient, and non-violent beyond necessity. Derek thrashed weakly before giving up, gasping. The wind screamed over the rooftops. From the doorway, Linda whispered, "My God." But Ethan didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. Tired of men like this. Tired of the past that made him unable to walk away when others were hurt. His heart hammered painfully under his navy coat, a drumbeat that reminded him of nights when no one had come for him. He secured Derek's arm just long enough to ensure the man couldn't rise again. Then he released him. Ethan stepped back. Atlas stood guard. Derek lay in the snow, panting, the fight draining out of him like warmth leaving the air. Mason reached out for Ethan then, his small voice barely audible. "Please, don't leave us." The words hit Ethan harder than any memory. And Chapter 2 ended there, on the edge of a decision that would change everything. The shadows behind the snowbound door. Ethan steadied Mason with a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, guiding him and Eleanor farther from the porch. His black knit beanie was dusted with thick flakes, and the cold clung stubbornly to the edges of his navy coat. But the sharpness in his eyes, dark brown and unwavering, felt hot enough to burn through the storm. Fear wasn't new to him, but what he saw in Mason's trembling breaths stung in a way battlefields never had. Eleanor leaned heavily against him. Up close, Ethan could see the fine wrinkles at the corners of her pale blue eyes, the kind born from years of soft smiles and quiet sacrifices. Her skin was fair, the winter shadows making it look almost translucent. She winced when she moved her bruised shoulder, and Ethan knew the pain was worse than she let on. "Stay behind me," he murmured, soft but firm. Atlas stood in front of them, every muscle tight beneath his black tan coat. His ears angled forward, nostrils flaring as he tracked Derek's movements inside the house. Snow collected on his harness, the white flakes contrasting sharply with the black fabric and the bold lettering. "Service dog, do not pet." He was utterly silent now, the calm before the break. Inside the house, Derek's footsteps crashed from room to room. Wood clattered, drawers slammed. The muttered curses grew louder. Ethan recognized those sounds, the chaos of a man seeking something dangerous enough to tip the night from bad to catastrophic. Then, a piercing shatter exploded through the storm. The front window burst outward, spraying shards across the porch. Mason screamed and clung to Ethan's coat. Eleanor gasped and shielded her face with her sleeve. Ethan didn't flinch. His voice snapped out like a command echoing down a military hallway. "Atlas, safeguard!" Atlas sprang forward the instant the last syllable left Ethan's mouth. His paws hit the steps with rapid, controlled thuds. He didn't attack Derek, not yet. He angled his body sideways, forming a barrier between the gun barrel and the people behind him. Because Derek now stood in the broken window frame, gripping a long-barreled hunting rifle. His face was red and streaked with cold sweat. His eyes held the wild, glassy look of someone teetering between fury and desperation. "Get back!" Derek shouted, voice cracking. "This is my house, mine." He was wrong and drunk and dangerous, but he was also terrified. Ethan heard it under the bluster. Men like Derek weren't born monsters. They were shaped by years of losing control of their own lives, and then clawing for it in all the wrong places. But none of that mattered while a child and an elderly woman were in danger. "Put the gun down, Derek," Ethan said, stepping slightly forward but staying behind Atlas's line. "You're drunk. You'll regret every second of this." Before Derek could answer, another figure hurried into view from across the bar street. Sarah Donnelly, a woman in her mid-30s, ran toward them. She was tall and slender, with dark auburn hair tied into a messy winter braid. Wisps framed her oval face, flushed from the cold. Her skin was lightly freckled, and her green eyes shone with both fear and determination. She wore an oversized gray parka, black snow pants, and foam-lined boots. Clearly someone used to Alaskan storms, but not to nights like this. Sarah stopped beside them, breath fogging the air. "I heard the window. Oh, God, is he holding a gun?" she whispered. Ethan gave a quick nod. "Stay low. Stay behind them." Sarah crouched next to Mason, placing a steady arm around him. Her voice softened instantly. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe right here." Her calm steadiness surprised Ethan. It reminded him of the medics he'd known, people who could face chaos with trembling hands but unshakable determination. Inside the house, Derek stumbled closer to the shattered frame. The rifle wavered dangerously. "Leave!" he screamed. "All of you! Leave!" "No," Ethan answered quietly. "Not while they're in danger." Atlas took another measured step forward. His head dipped lower, his ears flattened, and a deep growl vibrated through his chest. He positioned himself so the gun's line of sight couldn't reach anyone but him. "Come on, Derek," Ethan continued. "You don't want this. You don't want to hurt anyone tonight." "I already did," Derek whispered hoarsely. "I messed up. His grip tightened. He raised the gun an inch. Eleanor whimpered. Mason covered his ears. Sarah gasped. The wind roared. Then everything happened at once. Atlas lunged, not at Derek, but directly under the rifle's barrel, shoving it upward with the hard edge of his harness. Derek fired involuntarily. The shot tore into the top corner of the doorframe, splintering wood and sending a shower of dust and insulation into the air. Atlas barked, sharp and commanding. Ethan surged forward. Snow whipped violently around them, blurring shapes and sound. And the moment the rifle recoiled, the entire world hung in a breath of dangerous stillness, uncertain whether Ethan could stop what would come next. A winter night where no one was left behind. The gunshot's echo still clung to the air when Ethan surged forward, every muscle in his body honed by years of training and countless nights where hesitation meant death. Snow spun around him like smoke. The world narrowed to Derek's panicked face and the trembling rifle slipping from his hands as Atlas forced the barrel upward. Derek staggered back, crashing into a corner of the living room, visible through the shattered window. The dim, flickering lamp inside threw chaotic shadows across his sweat-streaked face. He looked less like a threat now, and more like a man drowning in the consequences he never thought would come. Atlas didn't give him a chance to recover. The German shepherd moved with calculated precision, close enough to pressure Derek, but never crossing the threshold into violence. His hackles rose along his spine, his amber eyes unblinking, locking Derek into the corner with an authority beyond words. Ethan slipped through the broken doorway, boots crunching on glass fragments. He kept himself between Derek and the others outside. A cold blast whistled through the shattered frame, swirling snow inside the small house. Derek's breath hitched. His hand twitched toward the fallen rifle. Ethan reacted instantly. In a single practiced motion, he stepped forward, hooked his arm around Derek's wrist, twisted, and pinned the man's arm behind his back. Derek let out a guttural yelp, the alcohol making his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. "Don't fight it," Ethan murmured, voice low but steady. "It's over." Derek sagged under the pressure, confusion and shame flickering across his red-rimmed eyes. His knees folded, and Ethan guided him to the floor without brutality, only firmness. The rifle lay inches away, glinting dully under the lamp. Outside, Mason and Eleanor watched with wide, anxious eyes. Mason's small hands clung desperately to Sarah's sleeve. Sarah held him close, her green eyes reflecting both relief and lingering fear. Her auburn braid had loosened, strands whipping around her pale face as the wind intensified. Several doors along the street cracked open. Neighbors peered out, drawn by the sound of breaking glass, raised voices, and a gunshot slicing through the frozen quiet. Their faces showed a mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. And then, at last, flashing blue lights cut through the snowfall. 2 police cruisers rolled to a stop, tires slipping slightly on the icy road. The first officer who stepped out was Officer Paul Rennick, a man in his early 50s with a stocky build and a neatly trimmed silver mustache. His cheeks were weathered from years in Alaskan winters, and his steady gaze carried the calm confidence of someone who had walked into chaos more times than he could count. He was followed by Officer Jamie Ruiz, younger, mid-20s, slim but athletic, with short dark hair and a soft, steady expression. Jamie's brown skin contrasted with the white snowflakes collecting on her uniform jacket, and her movements were cautious but purposeful. Paul's voice boomed across the yard, commanding yet controlled. "Sir, step away." Ethan lifted both hands slowly. "He's restrained, the weapon's beside him." Paul nodded once, immediately assessing the situation. Jamie moved forward to secure the rifle, her gloved hands precise. Inside the house, Atlas shifted slightly, staying beside Derek, watching every twitch of his muscles. His calm, controlled posture seemed to impress both officers. Jamie shot at him an admiring glance. "Good dog," she whispered under her breath, though she respected the patch on his harness by keeping her distance. Ethan finally stepped back, allowing Paul to take over. Derek didn't resist when the cuffs clicked around his wrists. The fight had collapsed out of him. His shoulders drooped, his jaw quivered. The red fury that had powered him minutes earlier dissolved into something hollow and lost. As Derek was escorted out, Mason pressed himself tighter against Sarah. The boy's small voice trembled. "Is he going away?" Sarah rested a reassuring hand on his back. "For now, sweetheart, you're safe." Eleanor's breath eased out in a shaky sigh. Relief softened the tension that had held her shoulders rigid. When Derek reached the porch, he turned his blurry eyes toward Ethan. For a split second, something haunted flashed there. Regret, or maybe the recognition of a man who had once lost control the same way. But Ethan didn't return the look. Tonight wasn't about Derek's past. It was about protecting the people he'd hurt. Paul guided Derek into the cruiser. Snowflakes melted against the metal roof with quiet taps. Jamie approached Ethan. "Sir, you handled that professionally? You military?" Ethan shrugged slightly, the movement tight due to lingering adrenaline. "Just a neighbor." Jamie smiled faintly, though she clearly didn't buy the answer. "Well, Anchorage could use more neighbors like you." Atlas wandered to Mason then, his protective posture softening. He tilted his head gently, amber eyes warm. Mason reached out with a trembling hand, not touching, just resting it on the air close to Atlas's harness, respecting the rule engraved on the patch. "Thank you," he whispered. Atlas blinked slowly, as if understanding. The storm raged on, but for the first time that night, warmth settled over the small group gathered on Elmwood Street. A silent acknowledgement that none of them had been left alone in the dark. And the chapter ended there, the snow still falling as the lights of the cruiser faded into the night. The winter that found its warm light, snow drifted gently across Elmwood Street, softening the chaos the night had carried only an hour before. The flashing police lights had faded into the storm, leaving behind a strange, aching quiet. The kind that comes after danger has passed, but fear still lingers in the bones. Inside the ambulance, Eleanor Wells lay on a gurney, bundled in thick blankets. Her silver hair fanned across the pillow like pale silk. A paramedic, Nora Klein, a compact woman in her late 30s with sharp cheekbones and dark curls pinned under a navy cap, moved efficiently around her. Nora's warm brown eyes contrasted with her brisk professionalism. She had the aura of someone who'd seen plenty of emergencies and learned to balance empathy with precision. "You're going to be all right, ma'am," Nora said gently. "Just a few checks at the hospital, nothing to worry about." Eleanor offered a weak smile. "I'm more worried about Mason than myself." Nora glanced toward the open ambulance doors, where Mason stood gripping Atlas's harness as if it were a lifeline. The boy's small frame shook from cold and leftover fear, but his eyes never left his grandmother. "I'll keep an eye on him," Nora assured her. Ethan stood behind Mason, hands in the pockets of his navy coat, expression unreadable. Snow gathered on the brim of his black beanie. His face was still taut with the last threads of adrenaline, but beneath it was something softer, something he hadn't felt in years. Loss, maybe. Recognition. Responsibility. When the doors of the ambulance finally closed, the low hum of the engine broke the stillness. The vehicle backed up slowly, tires crunching through ice, then disappeared into the night with a muted wail of its siren. Mason tightened his hold on Atlas, burying his face briefly into the dog's harness. The German shepherd stood patient and still, amber eyes soft, tail hanging low in calm reassurance. He looked almost larger than usual beside the small boy, a silent guardian carved in black and tan. Ethan knelt beside them. "Hey," he said quietly. "She's safe. They'll take good care of her." Mason looked up. His cheeks were red and wet, his eyelashes clumped from tears and snowflakes. She said she's okay, but she always says that when she's hurt." Ethan's chest tightened. He remembered another child, another winter, another lie spoken to protect someone too small to understand the world's cruelty. His voice came out rough but steady. "She's strong, Mason, stronger than she looks." Mason nodded a little, though he didn't let go of Atlas. Sarah appeared beside them, her auburn braid now nearly undone, the frozen air turning stray strands stiff. Her green eyes glimmered with concern. She carried a heavy wool blanket and gently wrapped it around Mason's shoulders. "Here," she whispered. "You're freezing." "Thank you," Mason murmured, voice thin. Sarah gave Ethan a brief glance, one filled with admiration and something unspoken, before stepping back to give them space. For a moment, all three of them stood in the soft glow of the street lamp. The snow fell in swirling ribbons around them, painting the world in white, Ethan exhaled slowly, turning toward Mason. I should head back, and you're safe now. But Mason's voice, small, shaky, earnest, stopped him. Wait, please. He hesitated, wiping his face with his sleeve. Can you and Atlas come home with me, just until Grandma wakes up? Ethan froze. The request hit him deeper than he expected, deeper than he could prepare for. 1,000 memories rose like a blizzard behind his eyes, of cold bunkers, of nights spent alone after the war, of people he couldn't save, of families that didn't wait for him to return. He'd built walls around all of it, bricks mortared with silence. But this boy, with his trembling fingers gripping a service dog's harness and his voice cracking on the edge of hope, had slipped past those defenses without even trying. Before Ethan could speak, Atlas nudged Mason gently with his muzzle, a soft, slow motion that spoke louder than words. Ethan's breath caught. He swallowed once, then nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. We can do that. Mason's face lit with fragile relief, his grip loosening as if a weight had lifted from his small shoulders. The three of them walked back toward the Wells house, the porch lights flickering like candles, the broken window now covered with a hastily placed board by a helpful neighbor. Sarah followed behind at a respectful distance, ready to help, but knowing this moment wasn't hers to step into. Ethan settled with Mason on the porch, Atlas lying protectively between them. The warmth of a small wood-burning stove glowed through the living room curtains. Inside the house, faint light danced against the walls, spilling onto the snow like a soft promise. Anchorage winter was brutal, indifferent, merciless. But tonight, because of courage, compassion, and a bond forged in crisis, the cold felt a little less sharp. And the chapter ended there, in the quiet of a night where kindness burned brighter than fear. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with trumpets, halos, or blinding light. Sometimes, they walk in on tired boots, wearing a navy winter coat, carrying the weight of old scars. Sometimes miracles have 4 legs, amber eyes, and a service harness dusted with snow. And sometimes, in the coldest hours of our lives, God sends help in a form we never expected. On that winter night in Anchorage, help came through a Navy veteran who refused to look away, and through a loyal German shepherd who stood between darkness and the innocent. But the truth is, God was already there, guiding every step, steadying every trembling heart, lighting a small fire inside a frozen world. Maybe that is the real miracle, that even in a world filled with fear, there are still people who rise up, choose kindness, and protect strangers as if they were family. Maybe miracles aren't rare at all. Maybe they're happening quietly around us, in every act of courage, every moment of compassion, every time someone says, I won't let you face this alone. As you finish this story, take a moment to remember this. God still works through ordinary people, through neighbors, through protectors, through those who stand up when others stay silent. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that goodness still lives among us, please like, share, and comment to help this message reach someone who needs it today. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us of the love, hope, and grace God places in our everyday lives. May God bless you, keep you safe, and guide you through every storm you face. Amen.